Hello. Good afternoon. Well, good afternoon. How are you? How are you? It is a little later than I normally choose or do. Am I live over on Facebook? The eternal question. Am I live on Facebook? Who knows? I've also got a little setup here where, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to see the comments on Instagram. Because I've got a weird little setup going on here. Well, let's see. Maybe if I do this and have a terrible angle here on Facebook, then I can see my Instagram comments a little better. Okay, I can see Instagram. Sorry, Facebook, you're going to have a little weirdness. Ooh, I don't need you to see that much of my kitchen. Over there on Facebook. There you go, maybe. All right, well, I've got a little weirdness. Oh, sorry. See it on Facebook here. I'm like really dark and light balance. Never my strong point. I'll move that back a little bit. All right. Well, today I'm about a minute before I said I was going to start, so I'll just blather for a second or two, shall I? Hello. It is my pleasure to be doing some live office hours today. I normally would have my live office hours 3 hours earlier than this at noon my time, but my massage therapist had a last minute cancellation and I haven't seen her in a long time. And so I was at like 12:30, and so I was like, yes. Just my face is a little puffy now. Little puffy, my eyes are a little puffy. Ooh. From having a massage, which that's okay. That is okay. Also, I'm super thirsty because need to hydrate after having a massage, right? If you've had a good one, you know you need to massage or need to hydrate, right? After a good massage. Dear Facebook friends, I do not see where the comments are on Facebook right now. So if you're commenting on Facebook, I apologize because I can't see any comments. I don't know. Facebook, what is your deal? I do not know. Hopefully no one's commenting over on Facebook. Let me see what's happening. Hi from Peru. Hello. And then on Instagram, I've got to do this whole rigmarole to kind of see the comments, which, ooh. Okay, well maybe I'll do it this way. But then my head is cut out. Oh. I'm a mess. Massage messed me up. Okay, so if you are commenting on Facebook, I apologize. I am in some kind of weird little Neverland here where I don't see the comments. So, and yet it says that I am live. So, no clue what's happening over there. Maybe try to comment and I'll see if it pops up somewhere on my screen, right? I do not know what's happening there. Whatever. Anyway, all good. Hey friends, it's Dr. Shannon Coates. These are some live office hours with moi. Where on Fridays I like to talk a little bit more about concepts in voice pedagogy. I like to talk a little bit more about, Chantel is saying that she commented on the live. She's in my messenger. I love it. And I don't know what's going on. Like where? So folks are multi-listening. I don't know where the comments are. Like how annoying is that? Now that you're live, you can see your real-time insights or add tools to increase distribution or engagement. Well, that's great. All I really want to do is see my comments, Facebook. That's all I really want to do. But I don't seem to be able to find them today. So I must be in some kind of other weird place where the comments Heaven only knows. Facebook. Oh well, I don't know. I apologize. I'll see them afterwards. Okay, wait. One more button I might try to press. Nope, that's not doing it. Also not doing it. I don't know. I give up. Someday, I will be off Facebook entirely. That is my big whole dream, y'all. To not be on Facebook at all someday. No day soon, as far as I can tell. Okay, so what I wanted to talk about today, let me just see, what do we got here? Oh, it's all those yummy healing chemicals in my brain. That's right. All those yummy healing chemicals in my brain are like not allowing me to like see comments. something weird is happening. All right, what I wanted to talk about today, something that's been, you know, I've been thinking through and that I was mulling over while I was having my massage too, is this concept of binary and the binary concepts in the voice studio and how it applies to the voice studio. And this is coming about, I'm trying to remember whether it was Dr. Ginevra Williams or whether it was Peter Jacobson, both of whom are British, by the way, who wrote recently, or maybe in the last 3 months, I don't know, 6 months, who knows, you know, a very thoughtful post. I think it was Dr. Williams, I think it was Ginevra, who wrote, and Facebook, okay, Facebook is just like not available now, and now I have to reload the page. It's not, okay, you know what? Screw you, Facebook. Here we go. Blinded by joy. I know. Hi, Rachel. Okay, I'm just Instagram. I'm just looking at you now. So it's done. It's done. Hopefully I'll be able to download this later and put it on Vimeo for other people to watch. But so I don't remember whether it was, I know the signal froze. Chantel is telling me the signal froze. I know, right? I'm going to try to stay focused now. I'm going to just bring it all together. I can do it. I can bring it. So I think it was Dr. Ginevra Williams who wrote a really thoughtful post and posted it to Facebook and possibly in a blog as well about the concept of whether we're still thinking in binaries in voice teaching, and whether there are still binaries left in voice teaching and in the way that we think about the way that the voice works. And so that was sort of mulling around in the back of my mind. Hi, I see you. Oh gosh, what a crazy little journey it's been this afternoon. And then at the same time, I've been working, as most of you, I know, hi Chantel, I know, Facebook just gave up on me. The page just stopped, so, as most of you, or as some of you may know, I've been working with a practicum of 9 voice teachers for the past 2 weeks. We're just coming up to the end of our second week. In a practicum, in a contemporary voice practicum. And so the main focus of the practicum has been, you know, how do we teach in a contemporary style, and examining a lot of the things, I mean, certainly talking about anatomy and physiology and exercises and all those sorts of things, but also examining and re-examining the things that we have taken from our Western classical training, whether implicitly or explicitly, and the ideas around how we teach and how, and how we think about tonal outcomes. And some of those things that we've brought over from our Western classical training and brought without, really considering them into our contemporary studios and when we're training contemporary voices in popular musics. And we had Jessica Baldwin in to do a Q&A, and she, as always, threw a whole bunch of just wonderful, bombshells in that also helped to refine and help us to rethink some of the things that we had brought with us from our Western classical training into contemporary training. And one of the things that Joelle Turner, who is part of the one of the teachers in the group this time around, said today in our live discussion time, in our group discussion time, something that just kind of jived with some of the other things that I've been thinking about in terms of binaries. And she said, they said that they never use or they rarely, if ever, use binary terminology in the studio. And they were referring pretty specifically to male-female in the studio, and they are non-binary themselves, so they were referring to that. We were having discussions around that terminology, so they were referring pretty specifically to that, and to not using, a male singer, female singer, and using that terminology in the voice studio. And then that got me thinking, of course, kind of combining with what Dr. Ginevra Williams was talking about in terms of whether we have binaries in the voice anymore and in technique anymore. And so I wanted to just kind of outline a few of the binaries that we have considered for a long time, that we sort of have had in the studio, and just kind of think through or talk through a few of them briefly, not too long today, because as I said, I had a massage, and so I would like to maybe go have a bath or something, but it was a long massage too. I get 90-minute massages. I'm like super, like, you know what? I'm not spoiled. I make the time for them. I pay for them. I do all the things. So like, I'm not spoiled. I have chosen them. So there we go. I have 90-minute massages. I am privileged to be able to make those choices. That's for sure. But it was a long massage, and it was like a good one, and I needed it. And so I'm gonna need to like do a little decompressing once I'm done talking here. So one of the binaries that I have definitely talked about in lives, thank you. thank you. Oh, thank you. Folks going like, you deserve it. So one of the binaries that I have talked about before, and that if you have, followed me in any capacity, you will have likely come across. Exactly. I agree, Rachel. I agree. If you have come across in any capacity, or if you follow me in any capacity, you have likely come across before, and that is the binary of good and bad. And that's that moral binary in terms of whether something, whether a sound is good or bad. And of course, maybe not of course, but, and that is something that I have addressed pretty, I wouldn't say extensively, but quite a bit, concerning the fact that sounds don't have a moral value. It is not a good or a bad sound. It is simply a sound. And whether it is a more coordinated sound, whether it is the sound that we wanted to create, whether it's the tonal outcome we were going for, that's another story, but that doesn't make it a good or a bad sound. So that moral binary of whether something, like, we can move right out of that binary 100%, and just not even use that at all, right? And move our language into, and our observation of sound from whether it's a good or a bad sound, and move that into whether it is a coordinated sound, whether it is, not as well coordinated sound. And so that might sound like there's a binary there, but it isn't a binary, right? Coordinated to uncoordinated is a spectrum. There's a whole spectrum between, like, well coordinated to get the tonal outcome I'm looking for, and not well coordinated to get the tonal outcome I'm looking for. That's a whole spectrum. So that's not a like yes or no either. So we can move into this coordinated or uncoordinated, or not as coordinated. The other binary that we were talking about, and that I addressed really specifically in the contemporary practicum, the contemporary voice practicum, in our 4th live training that I did, we talked about healthy and unhealthy sounds. And again, that has, not only does that have some, in general, our idea of what is a healthy sound or a not healthy sound has been handed down to us from our Western classical training. And so a lot of the things that we would consider a healthy sound or not a healthy sound are things that we would say is actually a coordinated sound for Western classical training, or a not coordinated sound for Western classical training, or for Western classical tonal outcomes. So when we have those tonal outcomes in our mind, then the binary comes in about whether something is healthy or unhealthy. And what we're actually looking for especially in all of our training, but especially in our contemporary sounds, is we're actually looking for whether it's sustainable or not. It's not whether it's a healthy or unhealthy sound, it's whether it's a sustainable sound. And that as well is a spectrum, right? So this may be a sustainable sound for the next, this may be a sustainable sound with these caveats, that you do it intentionally at this particular time, that you are intentional about when you use the sound, that you use a balanced cool down to sort of balance the kind of sound that you're making. I mean, there's so many ways that a sustainable or perhaps an unsustainable sound can be made a sustainable sound. So there's a whole spectrum there. There's not a full-on like unsustainable versus sustainable. Not to mention the fact, as I said in our live training, none of us can tell whether something is actually a sustainable or unsustainable sound for that singer anyway. I mean, we can make some guesses for sure, and there are some sounds that are more likely to be unsustainable than others, but we really can't, There are lots of singers out there doing stuff with their voices that don't sound sustainable to me, but they're like, they've had 40-year careers using their voices in that way, so apparently sustainable. What do you know? So we're just kind of changing that binary around and kind of changing that way of thinking about the voice around. One of the other binaries that has been with us, true, yes, true. So one of the other binaries that has been with us as voice teachers for a long time is the binary of head voice versus chest voice. And of course I've got big, huge quotation marks around those two words, but the binary in terms of registration, and something that, I was reminded of when I was listening to Ken Bozeman do a lecture through Singing Space, I think it is. Another British reference. What? All the British references today. And Ken, except for Ken's not British, but. And Ken was saying, this is like this reminder, the fact that the longer we train, the less apparent it is in our singing voice, whether we're singing in chest voice or head voice, right? That's really what we're training to do. We're training to take the sort of raw, open chest voice sound where we say, oh yeah, that's 100% thick folds with, TA dominant, however we want to call it, mode 1, versus that's 100% head voice. And especially, of course, in the middle range or the mix range, or whatever we want to call that middle part of the voice, where we do have lots of options in terms of what we're doing at the glottis, of course, with the vocal folds themselves, whether they're thick or that's funny. And just because if people watch this video afterwards, Rachel said like THICC folds, which if you don't get it, I'm not explaining now, but and I'm just going to pretend I don't get it either. I don't know what you're talking about. So whether we're talking about thick folds or thin folds, like that binary is we really only see that binary in untrained singers or beginning singers, right? Where they have a crack, they're like, like where they have that crack because they're not well trained yet. They don't have that coordination yet. So we really only see that binary, that very clear binary between, mode 1 and mode 2, if you will, at the vocal fold level. We really only see that in untrained singers, and the whole point in many cases of taking voice lessons is not the whole point. One of the things that we do train in voice lessons is to have a way so that you can't really tell, am I in full mode 1 or mode 2, am I in full chest voice or full head voice here, which you can't really tell. Why? Because there's so many other things going on with the vocal tract, specifically with the vocal tract, but there's so many other things going on as we create the sound. So that binary, hi 10 Moon in Space, I just mentioned you earlier actually. You got me thinking about binaries in the voice studio with your comment earlier today. So that's one of the other binaries that is really, again, it's still part of our language. We still use chest voice, head voice. We still use that as part of our language often in teaching. However, it isn't actually the binary we think it is. It really isn't. This binary is very much, you know, there are very specific small parts of the vocal range, and in most of our contemporary and popular musics, we don't use those parts of the vocal range very much. It's only in the extremes in our operatic singing, for example, where we might use those parts of the vocal range all the time. And there are only these two specific parts of the voice where, like the extreme ends of the voice, where we're actually using, say, full chest voice, where we're in full glottal or fully mode 1. I mean, we're in fully mode 1 a little bit more if we're a Western classical testosterone influenced larynx. That is going to be a lot more mode 1, and then or where we're in fully mode 2 or head voice. So that binary is it's losing its power. Again, we still use this language, but it doesn't really have the same one or the other that we may think it does. So that's another binary that kind of doesn't really need to be in the voice studio. And then the final one that I wanted to talk about, which is the one that kind of that Joe talked about earlier, or that Joe was responding to earlier, is the binary between male voice and female voice, and just that binary in general. But when we're talking about, I mean, I'm very intentional about using the terminology testosterone-influenced larynx versus estrogen-influenced larynx. And part of the reason that I'm very intentional about using that language, even though it is quite binary, but part of the reason that I'm intentional about using that language is because I am working almost, well, I only work with voice teachers at this point, so and because I'm working with anatomy and physiology and trying to break down the instrument really specifically so that we do have a really you know, specific understanding what's happening with the voice. And so I use that language as kind of a like a bridge between male-female voice, which is gendered, right, and has that binary inherent in it. So I use that language as a bridge to sort of say, okay, here are the different ways that human bodies form larynxes and vocal folds. Generally, we have a population that have comparatively speaking, have a relatively larger larynx and relatively larger, bulkier vocal folds. And generally, we have part of the population that has a relatively smaller, comparatively speaking, smaller larynx and smaller vocal folds. And that influences then what options we have in which pitch ranges. So that influences how much thickness I can get, how bulky my folds are going to be able to get, or how thin my folds will be able to get. That also influences which part of the sound wave is going to be, as it's traveling through my vocal tract, which part of the sound wave is going to be resonated more intensely as it travels through the vocal tract. If I have a smaller vocal tract, the upper part of the sound wave is going to be intensified. It's going to be a brighter sound. If I have a larger vocal tract, the lower part of the sound wave, I mean, there's more to it than this, but I'm not lying either. The lower part of the sound wave is going to be intensified as it travels through my vocal tract, and so I'm going to have a darker sound, essentially. I mean, there are other factors into it, but even that is not a binary. We are 100% on and there is 100% overlap. There are folks who have had a less testosterone dominant puberty, for example, who have smaller larynxes and smaller vocal folds, and there are folks who have had a more estrogen dominant puberty who have larger larynxes and larger vocal folds. And in our Western classical world, I had an estrogen dominant puberty. I had a lot less testosterone in my puberty, going through my puberty, and so, but still, part of the reason that I'm a mezzo is because look at my neck, it's huge, and look at my big old jaw, right? I've got a lot of space in there, so I have a warmer, yes, and that's a really good question as well, Chantal. So I have a warmer, tonal outcome in general, simply because of the shape of my vocal tract. However, my vocal folds are not like as thick. They're not as big, they are long, but they're thin. I know this from having a stroke, so having stroboscopy done. So they're not necessarily as big as someone who has had a testosterone dominant puberty, but there definitely is that overlap even within testosterone dominant and estrogen dominant puberty, so or testosterone influenced and estrogen influenced larynx, right? So even within, I'm using that language intentionally because I want to be really clear about what we're talking about, and I want to make sure that we're thinking about what we're talking about, and I want to make sure that we're taking the gender binary out. So, but even within that language then, there is a binary because I'm kind of comparing the two in that way. But I just want to be clear that that's the bridge. That language is, for me, is the bridge over to like, here's the spectrum. So that's what I'm going to be talking about as well in, I'm doing a testosterone-influenced larynx, or working with the testosterone-influenced voice on Wednesday. So one of my next pop-up class, POPUP Voice Ped class, is testosterone-influenced voice. And so there'll be some language, we'll be talking a little bit about that, but the main part of the reason that we don't necessarily understand how to work with that voice is because we're not aware of what happens in different pitch ranges. And we're not aware of how the voice and how larynx sizes affects our options within pitch ranges. So it isn't about the fact that I'm teaching a male singer, or a boy, or a tenor, or a baritone, or a male, or a man, or whatever. It isn't about that at all. It's about understanding what our options are within pitch ranges. So what's in it? So we'll get into a little bit of acoustics. We'll talk a little bit about acoustics on Wednesday. We'll talk, we'll just dip our toe into the acoustics. I promise it won't be intense, but that's what part of the reason that I want to, one of the main, that's a big question that folks ask me all the time. How do I teach, how do I teach male voice? I don't have a male voice, and I don't know, so I don't know what the things are, but as soon as you understand what the options are, acoustically, what the science is, when you start to understand what the options are in that pitch range, in a specific pitch range, so we're talking maybe G3 to G4 and maybe up to up to C5. So let's say we're talking about G3 to like C5, that pitch range. As soon as we start to understand what the options are acoustically within that pitch range, we start to understand what we're dealing with. So, and we instinctively, like the vast majority of voice teachers, independent voice teachers, are have estrogen influenced larynxes. And we also studied with folks who had estrogen influenced larynxes. So we have this understanding of how smaller larynxes work in those pitch ranges. So in let's say G3, I mean, it's a little low, but let's say G3 to C5. We have an intuitive understanding of how that works, and we may not understand the science behind it, but we have a very intuitive understanding of it. So then when we come to work with larger larynxes, with thicker vocal folds in that same pitch range, we don't have an intuitive understanding of how the larger larynx works. We don't understand what that spectrum looks like in terms of what the options are. So that's what we're going to talk about on Wednesday. So if you're interested in doing that, and you aren't already, get on my mailing list, and then you can get 10% off the cost of the class. So I want to come back to Chantal's question. Can you offer specific thoughts on how you use your language with children ages 9 to 12 or so to be non-binary with gender in talking about songs and ranges? Yes, I love that, Chantal. And I know thank you for asking, because I know we talked about that a little bit already today in the practicum. So A couple of thoughts for me, and folks might want to throw some thoughts in the comments too. Ooh, I think, is there a way now? Hide from live. Oh, there, look, I can pin it. Can you guys see it now? Can you guys see that comment? Can you offer? I think you should be able to see it. I don't know, maybe you can't. I don't know. Anyway, can you offer specific thoughts on how, so with children, for example, right, when we're working with young folks and folks who, you know, you may or may not be working in a studio where, where you're prioritizing non-binary language. Oh, you can see it, yay! So you may or may not be working in that studio where you're prioritizing that, and you may be in a studio, you may be in a situation where you are working to intentionally do it, but you are not necessarily sure exactly how to come around to that yet. And maybe you are, you know, like there are lots of levels of how much sort of, again, non-binary, especially around gender work we're doing, and that's fair. Hopefully we're thinking about it at least. So this is, I love this question because the you know, we come back to like, okay, so then how do I tell my student that I want them to listen to, you know, female artists? Or how do I tell my student that I want them, you know, that they're going to be singing in the soprano range, or they're gonna, you know, like what? How do we use this language? How do we create these? How do we create language in our studio, or how do we use language in our studio to create really inclusive spaces, and to create spaces that where someone who may be non-binary feels included and feels like they're safe in that space. So. I mean, I think one of the main things is, I think too, we get, and again, we're in the kind of gender space here, but we get a little bit tied up sometimes about doing the right thing, right? We want to do the right thing. So we get a little bit tied up about doing the right thing and like, oh, should I use this language or shouldn't I use this language? But really, if we start to think about like, what is it that I'm actually asking? So for example, perhaps I'm asking a singer to sing or perhaps a singer brings a song in that is sung by a mature singer with a testosterone influenced larynx, and who's singing in a range that is lower than a 9 to 12-year-old can handle. And so do I say, oh, this isn't a good range for you, it's too low because that's, you know, or that's a boy's song, or that's, you know, do we say that? No. I mean, what we can say is, let's get this into a range that you're immature sounds like I'm insulting folks, but it just means that you're non-adult, your non-matured instrument is able to handle. So let's just move this into a range that works for your instrument. And, you know, it doesn't have to be we're moving this because you're female and the singer is male. Because that's not why we're moving it, right? The reason we're changing the key, or the reason we're changing where we sing it, or maybe we sing the chorus maybe we sing the chorus an octave higher and we sing the verse, maybe we sing the verse an octave higher, because usually verses are lower anyway. So maybe we sing the verse an octave higher and we sing the chorus in the same octave, right? Like maybe we do that. Maybe we modify that song in a specific way, but we're not doing it because you're a female singer and this is a male singer song, or this is a male song, or this written in the male range. We're doing this because this happens to be in a range that doesn't work for your voice right now. So let's just make it work for your voice, right? So you start to say start to use the language that describes the actual thing. Hopefully that makes sense. So we use the language and we say things like, your larynx isn't big enough yet to get these, to be able to comfortably sing these pitches in these lower frequencies. So that's fine. Let's get them up here. Let's change the frequency. let's just change the pitch, right? Yeah, like yeah, Chantel's already heard this. I love that you asked it again though for the live office hours. Thank you for doing that. But yeah, so we just we actually describe the thing that we're describing, say the thing that we're saying, and I think it's both more simple and more challenging than we think it is in so often, right? Because so often when we're trying to do the right thing and we're trying to be careful and we're trying to we're trying to do right by our students, and so often we get like kind of caught up in like, what can I say and what can't I say? Chantel, I love it. But so often we get caught up in what can I say and what can't I say and what should I say and what shouldn't I say, and we kind of get caught up in it because we're trying so hard to do the right thing. And so that's the challenge of it, when in fact it's actually simpler than that. Same thing with our good and bad, when we're using good and bad, or we're using some of the other binaries that I was talking about earlier. We can literally just describe the thing rather than use the binary language that we have been using. So we can describe it. So but that isn't always the option that comes to our brain first, because we're trying so hard to do the right thing and we kind of get caught up in the language and caught up in it. And I think one of the examples we used earlier was, if we're asking singers to listen to, say, if we say, maybe we, I don't know, listen, if we want them to get some tonal outcomes in their mind, we want them to have some tonal templates, if you will, in their mind, and we want them to be tonal templates that are similar to their own voice, then rather than saying, okay, go listen to female pop singers, we can say, go listen to any singer you want who's singing in, that's comfortable for you to sing along with. So if it's comfortable for you to sing along with, they're going to be in about the same pitch range. And then if you do have someone who's non-binary, they're not going to be like, oh, why do I have to listen to girls sing? I don't identify as a girl, so like, why do I have to listen to girls sing? Or if you do have someone who's non-binary and wants to sing in the upper range, or if you have someone who identifies as male gender and who wants to sing in the upper range, it doesn't mean that they're like going like, I don't want to listen to girls, right? You're just listening to voices. So, or you're listening to voices that are singing that are singing in the treble clef range, or you're listening to voices that are singing in a higher range. We can say higher and lower, or in medium range, because lots of pop singers sing in that medium range too, of all the genders. All right, so that got a little more gendery than I thought it might, but something to consider over the weekend is just what are some of the binaries that we have in our studio, not just gender, certainly around gender, but what are some of the binaries that we have and that we're using in the studio? And trying to ditch good and bad and male and female, and affirm, and to continue to affirm vocalists. Yes, exactly, rather than having a judgmental, right, or moral stance, right? So no sounds have a moral value, right? And also, like I said earlier as well, continuing to consider, when I think a sound is unhealthy, is it because I think it's unhealthy, like they're going to get hurt right away, or is it because my Western classical training, or somewhere along the line, someone somewhere along the line told me that I was going to get hurt if I sang that way, or I was going to ruin my voice if I sang that way. And so what am I projecting onto this student? And rather than, is it healthy or unhealthy, start to think about what is sustainable. And how can I help to make this sound sustainable? How can we find ways to make this sound sustainable? Yes. So, is it sustainable versus is it healthy or unhealthy? Is it coordinated? Is it the tonal outcome that we're looking for? Sorry, I'm gonna stop playing with my hair. Awkward. Is it the tonal outcome we're looking for, rather than is it a good or a bad sound? Chest voice, head voice, that is a big binary, in that is really not as binary as we think it is. It's really way more of a spectrum. So that's a whole poll for another day, or a whole live office hours for another day. And then, yeah, the male-female binary. Something to think about this weekend. You're welcome. Have a terrific weekend. I think I am back on Monday at 9 a.m. Yes, exactly. How much time do you have? Exactly. What are your restorative practices? How much time do you have to heal? Oh, yeah, exactly. Sustainability is, and I mean, this is one time where that comparison to what's happening in the athletic field and what we do in voice is quite apt, where athletes are taking calculated risks all the time. I mean, professional athletes are on the edge of their performance, capability all the time, right? They're right on the edge of it. And they're taking calculated risks all the time. So are we, and they have, yes, restorative practices, beautiful way of putting it. That is exactly right. What are the ways that you can balance these vocal sounds, in this case, out, and to make them sustainable, or to make them more sustainable anyway. Yeah, love it. Okay. Have a terrific weekend, friends. I will see you on the flip side. Here we go. Boop.